Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Stormtroopers. They're amongst the most important characters in the entire Star Wars franchise. They're so crucial to the brand that in every generation of Star Wars, there is a version of them. Despite being created as an anti-war message about how soldiers are robotic and lose all their individuality in war, everyone still loves them. People cosplay as them all the time. Some use their iconic helmet for profile pictures on social media. They also make great disguises for armed robbery. But the truth is, being a Stormtrooper is extremely tough, so today we'll be listing out 5 reasons why it sucks to be a Stormtrooper. Now, there's tons of Legends information about Stormtroopers, but since Disney's taken over, they basically paved over the metaphoric swamp of treasure and horrors that Legends was, and replaced it with their own metaphoric Disneyland canon, which is highly regulated and somewhat geared towards children, and occasionally makes an adult want to shoot themselves in the face. Just joking, it's really not that bad. It's definitely not as bad as being a Stormtrooper. Now, in the first Star Wars movie, Stormtroopers start off looking pretty elite. They take out a bunch of rebels on Leia's ship without any problems. Obi-Wan Kenobi then explains to Luke how deadly their accuracy is. But shortly after that, everything goes downhill, and Stormtroopers can't seem to hit anything for the entire second half of the movie. By the time Return of the Jedi happens, sentient teddy bears are kicking their ass and then eating them. Now, a slew of Legends material came out trying to retcon everything and explain why Stormtroopers are actually still elite, but the recent canon paints a completely different picture. And from a certain point of view, there's even more retconning. In an incident report filed by one of the Stormtroopers sent to Tatooine in A New Hope, we find out several pieces of new canon information of what it was like being a Stormtrooper. For starters, the helmets given to these troopers were of extremely poor quality, and the temperature control was completely not functional, which was a pretty big problem on a desert planet which had 2 suns. Also, the helmet lacked good visibility, which is something Star Wars fans have been arguing about for the longest time. This in turn made it extremely hard for Stormtroopers to hit anything with their blasters, which also were terrible quality. On top of that, their body armor was considered archaic, and it was extremely uncomfortable and didn't offer adequate protection against the weapons rebels usually were deployed with. Although, to be fair, the armor is designed pretty well to dispel energy across the entire body of a wearer and to prevent penetration from a blaster bolt. So many of the Stormtroopers we see get shot in the movies most likely survived. Just not that guy, he definitely died. On top of that, regulations were strict and Stormtroopers had to constantly maintain their armor and keep it spotless, which was not only incredibly annoying but dangerous. A white shiny piece of armor in most environments is just a blaster bolt magnet. While the Stormtroopers lacked comfort and practicality, they did have an extremely potent suite of surveillance technology. Usually after a patrol or a mission, Stormtroopers were obligated to plug in their helmets so that ISB agents can go through their audio and visual records. This was oftentimes used to punish Stormtroopers who went against regulations. That could mean excessive chatter, removing one's helmet while in the field, or defecating on a statue of the Emperor. Which basically meant you couldn't be a human being for extended periods of time, and because the Empire was spread so thin, double and triple shifts weren't unheard of. Like the US Marine Corps, the Stormtrooper Corps wasn't independent. It was actually a subdivision of the Imperial Army. And like the US Marines, the Stormtroopers did the lion's share of dying and fighting, but also received much less funding than other branches of the military, especially compared to the Imperial Navy. The Stormtroopers were often based on Navy ships, depended on Navy fighters to escort their Navy transports to operations. And on the ground, they were supported by Army walkers. They basically didn't have much besides their helmets, blasters, and courage. Stormtroopers during combat operations are trained not to go to their wounded comrades' aid until the battle is completely over. This is probably why you don't see a lot of Stormtroopers geared as medics. Such is the case during the taking of Tantive 4. Whenever the Stormtroopers carry out an offensive, be sure they'll leave a trail of dying or dead Stormtroopers in their wake, which I imagine is extremely bad for morale. Just imagine how many soldiers bleed out during a firefight because basic medical care was not offered to them. Imagine what commanding officers have to say to the parents of their dead soldiers. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to inform you that your son has died of a sprained ankle. Well, actually, he was incinerated by extremely slow-moving lava, but because the operations on Mustafar took more than 45 days, we really couldn't get to him until day 45, and by that time, the bottom half of his body had been melted by the lava." The good news, ma'am, is although your son died an extremely painful and agonizingly slow death by smoke inhalation, The process actually smoked his upper body and preserved it quite well. I would say it's done to perfection. I have his body in the back of my speeder if you want it. The GAR was created for conventional war against deadly robots, which, to be honest, is the direction our own military should be heading. Did you know that according to the latest Pew poll, 75% of robot vacuum cleaners are unhappy with their current employment? And a shocking 85% of robot vacuum cleaners harbor ill will or homicidal thoughts against their owners. Anyway, the Galactic Empire, for the most part, was designed to quash rebellions and maintain the peace. Peacekeeping is much less glorious than conventional warfare, and it never ends. Imagine walking around a city like Jeddah, which is full of T-words, religious fanatics, and drug addicts in a white uniform, knowing that any second now a crazy blind monk can jump out of an alley, bash your brains in, and while you're struggling to get up, some crazy midget alien could run at you screaming Admiral Akbar and detonate a suicide vest. Asymmetric warfare sucks. No one likes to be in an ambush. But because of their combat mission, most of the Empire's vehicles and equipment are designed to instill fear and maximize the range and effectiveness of their military. The faceless armor is designed to hide the identity of the soldier from the civilians and separate them. The AT-AT Walker's height is awe-inspiring and designed for surveillance and monitoring. The Death Star's entire purpose was to discourage individuals from rising up against the Empire. But when the rebellion finally gained the ability to carry out conventional warfare against the Empire, suddenly the Imperial arsenal seemed lacking in many areas. The AT-AT Walker's height became its weakness. The Stormtrooper's armor turned out to be extremely cumbersome. And the Death Star became an incredible opportunity to kill a whole lot of Imperials. Yavin 4 was basically the Star Wars equivalent of Pearl Harbor times 9/11 times the 1980 Miracle on Ice. At the end of the day, all of these terrible things that Stormtroopers had to go through made me respect them even more. For a few decades, they were the thin white line that was separating the Empire and the less desirable citizens of the galaxy. For many Imperials, the white helmet represented safety from pirates, anarchists, non-humans, and moisture farmers. Speaking of Imperials, don't forget to check out Ben Hedges' latest video on Generation Films. Just in time for the holiday season, he'll be discussing the 5 most violent Christmas films ever. As if a once-in-a-year family gathering isn't violent enough, wait till you see the real war on Christmas. A sentient snowman named Jack Frost running around raping everyone. Wow, am I even allowed to say that? A special thanks to all you Patreon supporters out there. If you guys ever were killed by a slow-moving flow of lava, I would lie to your parents and tell them that you died a hero storming a nest of cannibalistic Ewoks riding feral Wookiees. All right, well, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.